So some joke about me coming in on a zip line. I don't think that's going to happen. If I can make fun of Joel since he made fun of me. Somebody said a little bit earlier, thank you, I appreciate that. Thanks for laughing. Said we should do a song called Joel, Joel, right, to Noel. Anyway, that was from the back there, the worship team, tech team. Speaking of music, I want to take you back to 1948. Many of you remember 1948, right? Yeah, there was a guy named Jay Johnson. He's riding in the train from his home in Connecticut to his job in New York City. And as he's taking this trip, he comes up with an idea for this song. Now, at that point in time, the song White Christmas was very, very popular. Gary talked about this a couple of weeks ago and how it was written to kind of bring hope to families who had family members and friends who were in World War II. And so he looks at this song and is like, hey, it's so successful, I think I can write something called Blue Christmas. And so he writes this song that was very much the opposite of White Christmas, called Blue Christmas. He said this is what Blue Christmas represented in his words. He says it represented sadness and melancholy of lost love during the holiday season. Very uplifting song if you know it, right? If you know much about the history of that song, it really took off about 9 years later. This guy right here did a Christmas album. The story is he didn't want to do it. Like he didn't want to do it, was pushing back on it, but put it in there anyway. Johnson says that the 1 year that Elvis put this on his Christmas album, their royalties were more than the 9 years prior to that for the song being out. And as you all know, it really has become a staple when it comes to the Christmas season. Because when you think about it, Christmas can sometimes be pretty blue. Think about the Christmas season. Isn't it funny how whatever's going on in our life right now, during the Christmas season, it gets magnified? Like if life is good, right? Let's say your marriage is good, your kid relationships are good, your job is good, finances are good, everything in your life is good. You come to the Christmas season, and it just kind of magnifies that goodness. You're kind of like, wow, my life is great. So you're full of happiness and joy, and you love to celebrate during the Christmas season. But when life is bad, it's a different story. When your marriage is broken, when the relationship with your kids is off, when you've lost a job, maybe your finances aren't where you want them to be. Like you come to a time like Christmas and it just magnifies the pain and the loss and the grief that we experience throughout our year as Christmas comes in. There's a lot of blue, can be, during the Christmas season. I mean, Christmas might be the time of year where for some of us we're reminded of what or who we've lost. For some, when Christmas comes around, it magnifies the loss of a loved one. Maybe it's mom or dad, a child. Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's a close friend. We get to the Christmas season and that pain, that hurt, that loss is magnified. Maybe it's the loss of a marriage. Christmas can highlight that pain of divorce. There's the tensions you have with your ex. There's the awkward conversations you have with them and maybe their new spouse. There's the question of who's going to have the kids during Christmas. And so Christmas comes, and in a divorce setting, man, you're struggling with, or that pain is magnified during that time. Or maybe it's an adoption that fell through, or infertility that left you with questions, or the grief of a miscarriage. If you've been walking that path, man, you come to Christmas season and it tends to be magnified. Or maybe it's just the emotional and physical struggles that we're facing in our lives. For many people, Christmas doesn't brighten their world. And what it brings with it is more pain and hurt because it's magnified. The things that we're struggling with in life get magnified at a time like this. And so my hope is over the next few moments as we spend some time together that we can find hope, right? Because I believe there actually is hope through the tough things that we face in life. And I want every Christmas to be just an incredible experience for us. Doesn't mean we can't grieve. It doesn't mean we can't mourn. Doesn't mean we can't have that pain. But maybe there's some hope we can find that can help make this Christmas a little bit better than before. And so we're going to start with the story of hope. And we're going to do it in kind of a different way than normal. Normally I would probably read this. But last Saturday we had our Christmas open house for our Journey Kids crew. And one of the stations here, they had people dress up in all these different outfits for the nativity scene. So Tiffany, who was in charge of that, took all those photos, put them together, and retold the Christmas story for many of you being in the position to kind of give us those images. All right? So sit back and watch this video. All right, can we hear it for all of our people who didn't know there were going to be a video today? Yeah. We did get permission last week, but anyway. I said this last week talking about this particular story, the Christmas story, what we call the Christmas story, how we tend to sanitize it, right? That when we look at Mary and Joseph, we kind of imagine them being really calm and always happy and excited and emotionally stable and spiritually mature. And then we think about Jesus, and here's Jesus, and he's a magical baby. There's a song, Away in the Manger. Look at these lyrics. The cattle are lowing, the poor baby wakes, but little Lord Jesus, no crying he makes. I mean, have these writers ever been around a baby in their entire life? No, because we know this isn't true. And then we think about Jesus being born, and he's born in like this Magnolia Farms barn dominium, and it's got heated floors, and there's this kitchen that's just been remodeled, and the bar is stocked, and everything's good to go. And then when Jesus is born, he drinks milk. I looked this up this week. Some of you maybe have used this. Good for you. But from $20 Pure Kiki stainless steel bottles. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of those before, with Mimi Jumi nipples, which are top of the line, I understand. Our kids are a lot older, so have never used this before. While sleeping in, and this is real, a $40,000 Bograd Kids Fantasy Air Balloon Crib. It's legit, and it actually has $40,000. But that's kind of this imagery that we have, right? Like everything is perfect and wonderful and amazing and magical, but that first Christmas was very, very blue. I mean, think about Mary and Joseph. They're under significant physical, emotional, spiritual, relational stress. They're poor teenagers. Now, Joseph might have been in his 20s. We don't know, but he might have been a teenager too. So they're really, really young. They're pregnant out of wedlock, right? Mary is pregnant. It's not Joseph's kid, it's God's kid, but they're pregnant out of wedlock. That would have brought with it a lot of social shame for them. They got to travel 80 miles by foot to go to Bethlehem because they have to be part of this census. And then when they get there, there's no place for them to stay, and they've got to stay literally in a barn, in a stable with animals. Not too long after this, a few months, maybe a year, up to 2 years later, the wise men show up, right? They're a little bit later on in the story, and the wise men go to King Herod like, hey, we know this king has been born, and we want to meet this king. And he's like, tell me who this king is so I can meet him myself. That wasn't his purpose. His purpose was to get rid of that kid. Well, the wise men never come back because God says, don't go back there. We need you to go back another way to protect this baby Jesus. Well, Herod jumps in. He finds out about this. He sends his soldiers into that area of Bethlehem and says, hey, I want you to kill every boy under the age of 2. And those soldiers did that. Can you imagine that, being a parent? You've got a 1-year-old boy, and one day you're sitting there in your home and you're playing with him, and he's rolling around and making noises, and you're saying that's mama and dada and all these kind of things. Next thing you know, these soldiers come in, they break in your house, they grab your son, they take him outside, and they execute him. Think about that kind of grief those families went through 2,000 years ago. Now, thankfully, to protect them, God sends Mary and Joseph to Egypt. They have to leave everything they know, the family they know, the people they know. They go to Egypt to protect themselves. Like, again, this isn't a sanitized Christmas Hallmark movie that many of you are watching right now. This is a tough time. There's darkness, there's fear, there's grief, there's loss. Like, this was a Christmas. It was very, very blue. And one that in many ways may have felt like there was no hope. But there was promise. There was a promise of hope. And that promise came from 700 years earlier. There's a prophet whose name was Isaiah. And Isaiah shows up in the midst of Israel's darkness. Israel is going through a tough time. There's deep despair. There's social injustice. There's idolatry. There's a false worship that's taken place. They're morally in decline. There's political fear. Isaiah writes these words in Isaiah chapter 8. It says, they will go from one place to another weary and hungry. And because they are hungry, they will rage and curse their king and their God. They will look up to heaven and down at the earth. But wherever they look, there will be trouble and anguish and dark despair. They will be thrown out into the darkness. Like, you're not going to find that on a Christmas card, are you? I mean, this is a tough time. This is a dark time for Israel. But then look at chapter 9. Nevertheless, the time of darkness and despair will not go on forever. The land of Zebulun and Naphtali will be humbled, but there will be a time in the future when Galilee of the Gentiles, which lies along the road that runs between the Jordan and the sea, will be filled with glory. So here's this prophet, Isaiah is telling Israel, I know right now you're living in this darkness, but there's a promise that hope is coming. There's a light that is coming. And then we get to this point in the passage here in chapter 9, verse 6, where we read some words that even if we didn't grow up in church, we're probably very familiar with these words. For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Israel had to endure a few hundred more years of blue Christmases, if you will, for that promise to come true. But thankfully for us today, that promise is true, right? That promise came true with the birth of Jesus, the Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Jesus was sent to give us hope in our blue Christmas. But how do we experience that? Well, I think the first thing that we have to be willing to do is that we have to be willing to draw close to God. We did a series right before this called Playbook. We were walking through the book of James. And in James chapter 4, verse 8, James writes these words, come close to God and God will come close to you. What do we tend to do when life gets blue, when life gets hard, when there is grief, when there's struggles in our life? Do we tend to go towards God, or many of us tend to walk away from God? And when we walk away from God, what are we looking for? We're trying to figure out our own solutions. I can figure this out. I don't need God. I'm going to pave my own path. And many times we find something in our life to kind of numb that pain. Man, this story has not been more real than it has been over the past couple of weeks. I don't know if you heard about this, but this particular guy right here broke into a ABC store down in Ashland. He broke a bunch of the bottles of liquor, ended up drinking it off the floor, and he passed out literally beside the toilet, which just blows my mind to this day. But you just want to tell this little raccoon guy, and this is a true story, like, hey, little man, there's hope for you, right? I guess he was having a hard Christmas season himself. Anyway, in all seriousness, and I'm not making fun of, people who decide to live that kind of life, but when life gets blue, we might oftentimes walk away from God. We might pull away from God. And I can tell you that usually brings more pain and more hurt and more loss. God invites us to draw close to him. Not because God needs something for us, but because God knows how to heal what you and I are going through. And so I want to take the next few moments and I want to walk through these 4 things that we read Isaiah writing about here in chapter 9, verse 6, because I believe what he talks about helps us understand how drawing closer to God, how drawing closer to Jesus does change our life. So let's walk through all 4 of those. Here's the first one. Jesus is our wonderful counselor. Jesus is our wonderful counselor. If you've been here any length of time, we talk about counseling a whole lot here at The Journey. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm not afraid to talk about it from here on stage. And I let you know, my wife Kara and I, we go and do a marriage counseling check-in about every 2 to 3 years. That's normal for us. I go see a wonderful human counselor every other week, and keeps me sane, keeps me in a job here. So I love being able to spend time with her. She helps me walk through whatever I'm going through in my life. Like, we believe in counseling. We believe it's very important. In fact, we believe it's so important that we fund counseling here. We put a part of our budget aside to do that. We do our Easter offering, and part of our Easter offering is for counseling. So we fund that. So there's never an excuse where you get to say, man, I'd really love to go to counseling, but I can't afford it. Because we will say, when you tell us you can't go to counseling and can't afford it, we can afford it for you. We will take care of that for you because we believe in the power of counseling. Now, if you think about a counselor, counselors are trusted advisors, aren't they? They're trusted advisors who guide us, who direct us, who help us figure out next steps, because sometimes we're just stuck. We don't know what our next step should be. And so having a wonderful human counselor is very important for us to help us take those next steps in life. Now, I do want to add this in here to this part. Sometimes you and I think we're the wonderful counselor, okay? And we have good intentions of trying to share words that we think will be helpful when someone's going through something tough in their lives. Maybe you've heard some of these before. God needed an angel, and that's why your family member died. Like, I'm just going to be honest, that's bad theology, okay? There's nothing in Scripture that says when you die, you become an angel. We don't become angels, right? Angels are something very different than us. And if you think about that, when you say that, it makes God sound like a big meanie, doesn't it? Like, God took this person from this life because God was mean, really, and wanted them more than you needed them. I mean, this is not something that's helpful in those moments of loss. Or maybe you've heard this: when God closes a door, he opens a window. Is that hopeful or helpful when you're going through grief and loss in your life? See, sometimes we feel like our intentions are there, right? We want to help somebody and we want to say something that will be helpful, but people don't need cliches. They need our presence. They need us to be present in their life. What they need is for us to stop and say, hey, I don't know what to say. I know you're struggling. I'm here for you. That's all we have to say. Paul writes it this way in Romans. He says, be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. Look at that verse. Paul doesn't say, tell those people that are hurting, snap out of it. Right? Doesn't say, get over it, you got this. Doesn't give some theological treatise on evil and why bad things happen. That's not what Paul says here. He says, When people are hurting, when they're weeping, weep with them. Another translation says when people are mourning, mourn with them, right? That is part of what we are called to do and who we are called to be. Be present, listen, comfort. That's Jesus as the wonderful counselor. In fact, that term, wonderful counselor, wonderful means it means miraculous. And then counselor, the term used there is an advisor to a king. That's what Jesus does for us. Jesus is just this miracle that happens in our life and advises us on what's happening in our life. And so when we say, hey, I'm going to draw closer to God, right? I'm going to be better at following Jesus. I want to follow Jesus. Hey, I'm going to come closer to you. But I'm going to invite you into my life to help me take the steps I need to take through whatever I'm going through. And Jesus listens to that, listens to who we are, listens to what we're struggling with. And we're saying, hey, Jesus, I trust you that you have the best intentions for me, because I can promise you Jesus does. I know that if I make decisions in my life, I'm going to make bad ones. I'm going to make the wrong decision. I'm going to try to pave a path, and it's not going to be good. And I'm going to end up numbing myself in some way because of the pain, the extra pain that I'm bringing. Jesus is this wonderful counselor that leads us and guides us, especially when our times are blue. And so Jesus, as a wonderful counselor, comforts us as we draw closer. Second thing, Isaiah says, Jesus is a mighty God. That term mighty God sometimes is defined as divine hero. I like it a little bit better this way. It means the strength of God. That Jesus not only listens to us, right, as that wonderful counselor, but Jesus also acts. That Jesus heals, Jesus restores, Jesus strengthens us. Jesus brings power into those powerless situations in life. If you go back and you think about Jesus' life, think about all the people that he drew to him. I mean, everywhere Jesus would go, these crowds would show up, and Jesus didn't say, leave me alone, right? I got more important things to do. You're wearing me out. No, Jesus just kept drawing people to him, and as he would draw people to him, he would then act. He would do these incredible miracles with the strength that he had from God. He would heal the lame. He would help the blind to see. He even brought dead people back to life. He had this incredible power to heal and to fix what was broken 2,000 years ago, but he still has that same power today to help us in the blues of life, if you will, that we face. That's why I love what Paul writes in Philippians 4. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he's done. Look at Paul's words there. Paul says, don't worry, and instead pray, right? Turn your worry into prayer. What we do oftentimes when we worry is that we have this inner monologue going on, that we're just talking to ourselves over and over and over again, and we're asking ourselves questions. Questions like, what am I going to do? How am I going to handle this hurt? How am I going to handle this pain? How am I going to deal with this guilt? How am I going to get through the loss of someone so close to me? And so we have this inner monologue, and for some of us, we know it's just consistent. It doesn't end. It's day after day. As we read Paul's words here, we probably need to change that monologue into a dialogue with God and begin to invite God into the pain and the hurt that we have. God, do only what you can do. So if you feel worn out or tired or hopeless, you feel like you're out of options, let the power of this mighty God, right, step into your life as you draw closer to him. Because Jesus is a mighty God. But the third one is Jesus is an everlasting Father. That everlasting Father means Father of eternity, which really says, hey, Jesus has always been and will always be, right? That Jesus is here for eternity. That Jesus is always present for our lives. Best way to describe this is to tell a story a guy named Bill Fry wrote, and it's a true story, and he wrote this in his book, Dance of Hope. He tells about this interaction with a student at that he was tutoring at the University of Colorado. And in this relationship, they got to know each other very well, and the student, John, was blind. And so one day, Bill asked John, he's like, hey, John, what happened? How did you lose your sight? John began to describe this terrible accident that happened to him when he was a teenager and everything that he experienced. And he said, it not only just took my sight, but it also took my hope. John talked about how bitter he was towards people. He talked about how angry he was at God because God had allowed this to happen to him. So as you can imagine, if you're at that place, you're gonna take that anger out on other people. And so he was taking it out on people he knew. He was taking it out on his family. He got to the place where he would just go and hang out in his room and then only would come out when it was time for him to eat. Now, Bills, he tells the story. He says, this is weird because the John he was talking to was not the John that John was talking about. And so he's like, what changed? What happened in your life? You're not that same person. John said, well, I can point it back to a day where my dad came to me early in the morning, and he said, John, here's the deal. Winter's coming, and I need you to put the storm windows out on the house, and I need you to do that by the end of the day, or else. Remember, John's blind, right? And John says that day he muttered all kinds of terrible things about his dad because he was so angry. But he made his way slowly to the garage. He got to the garage. He found the windows. He groped around. He found the tools. He found the step ladder. And he started to do this work. He started to put these storm windows up on the house. Again, angry, bitter, mad, saying things about his dad he shouldn't have said, even to the point of hoping that he would fall off the ladder, break his back. And he said, that'll teach my dad to ask me to do something like this. John, after hours, finished the job he was asked to do, and he said he realized that when he finished doing that work, that he accomplished the goal that his dad had set out for him that day. And he said that was the moment that he began to reconstruct his life. But he said something else was going on that day I didn't know about. He said a few years later, talking to my dad, and his dad never went to work that day. His dad was actually outside with him the whole day as he's buttering and cussing out his dad and angry at his dad. But his dad never left his side. Quietly, his dad stood by and was there just in case he fell. Think about what Isaiah says here about this everlasting Father who's always present. He's describing this perfect, protective, faithful Father, that when our lives are blue and it feels like there's nothing else out there for us, if we feel like we are lost in the grief and the hurt and the pain, this everlasting Father is closer than we think. See, God is a wonderful, powerful, everlasting Father who's always close to you. But then we have this fourth one, right? Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Prince here doesn't mean the next in line for king, kind of like Prince William. We're talking about something else. We're talking about the one in charge of peace. Now, I want to say this. When we hear that word peace, we kind of have an idea of what peace is. Now, if you think about that word peace, peace for us really is kind of has a negative connotation behind it, right? When we think about peace, it's an absence of conflict. Things are kind of teetering on the edge, if you will, but very, very quickly, things could change. Now, when we see peace in the Old Testament specifically, in the Hebrew, it's the word shalom. And it's different than our word peace. Shalom is this total satisfaction in life. It's wholeness. It's goodness. I love this definition of shalom. It's harmony in relationship with God. That even when our life is falling apart, God's desire is that we experience peace. Shalom that passes all understanding. That no matter what comes our way, we experience that shalom through Jesus. I love the story behind Jerry Sitzer's book, Grace Disguised. I love it because it's so powerful. He tells the story of how one day he's in his minivan and he's got most of his family with him. But their car is hit by a drunk driver. That day, his mom died, his wife died, and his younger daughter died in that wreck. Jerry talks about how he walked away physically unhurt, but over time, he said he learned to deal with that loss and that pain. And here's what he said. He said, the experience of loss does not need to be the defining moment of your story now. I'll read that one more time. The experience of loss does not need to be the defining moment of your story now. Like, our true defining moment is how we respond to loss in our lives. Your story doesn't have to be about loss, but your story can be about your response to loss. Like, pain doesn't have to be our identity. What it can be, lead us to this redemption that we find through the hope that is Jesus, that we actually get to experience peace. And I'm not talking about the peace we talk about. I'm talking about the shalom, this harmony in this relationship with God that we don't know how we're going to deal with it. We don't know how we're going to make it through. We just know that we are so connected and drawn so close to God because of Jesus Christ that we're able to walk through those defining moments of loss in our life. And how we respond is so important to that. And we can respond in a healthy way. Now, it might take years to get to this place because we have the power of the Prince of Peace in our life who brings that shalom in the blues of life that you and I may face. Just kind of think through those different words, descriptors that Isaiah uses about this Messiah to come, which, again, we know is Jesus, who we have this hope in. But maybe today you're sitting in this space and you feel lonely, feel isolated. Maybe there's regret. Maybe there's the grief of loss. And as you're in this Christmas season, again, as I talked about, it gets magnified oftentimes this time of year. Maybe you feel like your life is over. You don't have anywhere to move forward in. You don't know what the next steps are for your life. You think there's no way God can use you again. Maybe you don't even think God cares about you because of what you're feeling right now. That inner monologue might be traveling about 2 times the speed as normal. And so you're fighting that. There's a light that can come through God because of the birth of Jesus. That in the end, no matter what we may face, God will make a way for us. Gene Apple is a pastor out in California. He tells a story about Don Moen. Back in 1989, he wrote a song called God Will Make a Way. I'm going to save you and not sing it, but I'm going to put some of the lyrics up here on the screen. It says, God will make a way when there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me. He will be my guide, hold me closely to his side. With love and strength for each new day, he will make a way. Like, this story or this song fits so well with what we're talking about today, because Moen actually wrote this song for his sister-in-law and her husband because they had lost, tragically, their 9-year-old son in a car accident. Right? So for you and I, when we think maybe there's no way for me, there's no direction, I'm kind of stuck, this is where I am right now, and there's that pain and that hurt and that loss and that grief, and it keeps coming day after day after day. And the Christmas shows up, right? And it magnifies all this blueness that we're feeling deep inside of us. Maybe what we need is to remember that God will make a way in your life. The good news is, he did. It's the hope that comes through Jesus. The wonderful counselor, the mighty God, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. And so if you, right now in this moment, you're going through one of those blue Christmases in your life, may you find hope as you're reminded of the birth of Jesus. It gives us strength and direction and peace in the midst of what we face in life. I want to leave you with 4 next steps, and for some of you, they're going to fit specifically, and others, it may be something for you to think about. But let me just kind of share with you these coming out of this message today of a Blue Christmas. Here's the first thing. We have our We Remember service. It's happening on Friday evening at 6:30 here in this space. Maybe you have lost someone that you love, someone close to you. Maybe it's been this year, maybe it's been a few years back, but there's still this bond, this connection, and you miss them. This is just a chance to come together, to grieve, to mourn, but also to celebrate their lives. And so we hope that you'll take the time to be a part of that if that's where you are. Maybe you just come to support someone you know who's going to be here. You have till Wednesday to turn in the names to this. If you got questions about that, you stop by our Next Step table. But you can still sign up for that through our QR code or through the app. But our We Remember service this Friday night, if you're someone like you don't know how to deal with the pain you're going through and the tensions and the hurt and the loss and the grief, counseling is a great step to take. We would love to connect you with the people that we work with here locally that do counseling. Email us, info@thejourneynova.org. Let us know. You can also sign up or let us know through the QR code or through our app. But don't hesitate to take that step. Every week we have a prayer team that is up here during our services or at the end of our service. You may not know that. They're up here in the front to my left, to your right. They would love to pray over you, pray with you, pray for you, kind of help carry some of the burdens maybe you're carrying through this past week. But at the end of our service, our prayer team's up here. They would love to pray for you or over you today or any Sunday that we meet. And then maybe for others, it's the step of baptism. That you've kind of decided in your life, like, hey, I gotta do something here, right? I gotta take a next step, and I'm tired of being stuck where I am, that I know there is hope. I want to be all in when it comes to following Jesus, and I need to take this step in my faith journey. The cool thing is, Joel talked about this. We've got 3 people that are getting baptized here in just a moment. We had 3 in our first service today. We've got 3 teenagers that get baptized tonight during Refuel, which is very cool. But maybe you're here, you're like, I need to do that too. You're welcome to come up here in just a second when we're doing our video, showing a video, and just tell Joel, like, hey, I want to get baptized. And man, we'll make that happen today. We got towels, we got some clothes I think we can send you home with. But maybe that's your step, or maybe you just want to talk about it. Again, stop by our Next Step table. They would love to have that conversation with you. I think for all of us, there's probably a step that we can take today of some sort, whether it's what I just talked about or something else. But I don't believe this is a life that we have to live in that tension and the grief and the pain, that we can have the hope that only comes through Jesus Christ.